She loved ghosting men. Sienna was good at this. Too good. Or perhaps addicted. It always started the same way. A dating app. A few flirty messages. A smiley selfie to seal the deal. Then came the dinner dates where she never touched her wallet, where she leaned forward just enough for the low lighting to catch her eyes, where her laugh came in perfect, delicate bursts, never too much, never too little. She'd ask just enough about their lives to make them feel interesting, then offer up hints of her own that were just mysterious enough to keep them leaning in. And when the night ended, a polite hug, maybe a soft touch on the arm to keep them hopeful, followed by her vanishing from their lives like smoke through a keyhole. Blocked numbers, unread messages, the digital silence that drove them quietly mad. It wasn't about the money. It was the power. She loved that moment. When she knew she had them hooked, when their gaze followed her every gesture like she was the only person in the room. And then, when she slipped away, they'd be left wondering what they'd done wrong. She called it ghosting. Her friends called it cruel. Sienna called it fun. But then she met Evan. It was supposed to be just another night, another name, another face, another meal she'd walk away from without a second thought. She'd picked a cozy little bistro on the corner, the kind of place with dim amber lights and the faint sound of jazz drifting between tables. She arrived with her usual plan: smile, charm, disappear. And then he looked up. When Evan smiled, really smiled, it wasn't like the others. It wasn't the cocky, knowing grin of a man who thought he was winning her over. It was warm. Open. Almost as if he was relieved to see her. Sienna forgot her lines. The conversation didn't feel like work. She didn't have to pull clever quips from her mental playbook or calculate the exact tilt of her head. He made her laugh, really laugh, and she found herself leaning in without meaning to. By dessert, she wasn't thinking about blocking him at all. Evan was different. He didn't brag about his job or talk over her stories. He didn't keep glancing at his phone or scan the room for someone more interesting. He just listened. It was unnerving at first, the way he looked directly into her eyes when she spoke, as though every word was worth tucking away for later. And when he spoke, his voice was calm, deliberate, almost hypnotic. The food sat between them, barely touched, as conversation stretched over hours. She caught herself smiling without thinking about it. When the check came, Sienna reached for her purse, a reflex she almost never followed through on. But this time she surprised herself. Half, she insisted. Evan tilted his head, his mouth curving into that warm, slow smile again. All right. Half. It felt strange, and good. After dinner, they wandered through the city without a destination. The streets were alive with neon lights and the occasional distant hum of a streetcar. They passed buskers, coffee shops, and the soft yellow glow of apartments above them. Somewhere between a quiet joke and a shared glance, he suggested, almost casually, "Want to come by my place? I've got some old video games I haven't touched in years." Normally, Sienna would have made an excuse. But tonight, she didn't hesitate. The apartment was neat but lived in. A faint, warm scent lingered in the air, something like cedar and old paper. The lighting was soft, golden, casting the corners into gentle shadow. There was no clutter, but also no sterility. It felt comfortable. They sat cross-legged on the floor, controllers in hand, and laughed over pixelated characters and glitchy animations. Time slipped away without her noticing. When he leaned in, there was no rush, no clumsy grasp. Just a slow, deliberate closeness until their lips met in a kiss that was soft, almost cautious, like neither wanted to break whatever fragile magic had formed between them. For the first time in a long time, Sienna didn't feel like vanishing. For the next 2 weeks, Sienna's life felt like it belonged to someone else, someone happier, softer, less guarded. Evan didn't just keep her to himself, he introduced her to his friends during a small get-together at his apartment. They played board games, shared pizza, and laughed over inside jokes that she found herself slipping into like she'd been there for years. One of his friends, a woman named Jane, kept giving her strange, lingering glances, curious, almost searching, but Sienna brushed it off. They took pictures that night, Evan's arm around her, his smile wide and real. On impulse, she posted one to her feed. Within minutes, it was flooded with likes, hearts, and comments from friends who couldn't remember the last time they'd seen her post about someone she was dating. Everything felt perfect. There were late-night walks where the streets were nearly empty, their footsteps echoing in sync. Coffee in quiet, tucked-away shops that smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. Movie marathons where they fell asleep on opposite ends of the couch, then woke up tangled in the same blanket as the morning light crept in. For the first time in years, Sienna felt seen. So when they made plans for the weekend, she went all in, picked her outfit days in advance, even treated herself to a new perfume. The night before, she sent him a teasing message, "Better not be late tomorrow." No reply. She frowned but told herself he'd answer in the morning. Morning came. She sent another. Then another. By nightfall, she'd sent half a dozen messages, light-hearted at first, then concerned. All left unread. Days passed. Her text stacked up like unanswered prayers. The silence wasn't just frustrating. It was deafening. At first, she tried to be reasonable. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he'd lost his phone. Maybe he was the kind of person who needed space now and then. But as the days blurred into weeks, those excuses began to feel brittle, thin layers of comfort stretched over something colder, heavier. She messaged the friend she'd met at his place. One left her on scene without replying. Another never opened the message at all. Jane, the woman who had watched her so strangely at the party, read her question, "Have you heard from Evan?" but didn't answer. That stung. And it annoyed her more than it scared her, at least at first. Eventually, she decided to stop wondering and see for herself. One evening, she walked to his building. It looked the same as always, brick facade, narrow entryway, the faint smell of rain on stone, but somehow, quieter. She climbed the familiar stairs, her heels clicking softly, and stood outside his door. The curtains were drawn tight. No sound came from inside. No glow of light through the gaps. She raised her hand to knock. But it hovered there, frozen. A strange, irrational heaviness settled in her chest. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the sharp awareness of stepping somewhere you shouldn't. Something deep inside told her to turn around. And she did. By the time she reached the street, her pulse had calmed. She told herself she'd try again later, maybe call from the lobby next time. But she never did. Nearly a month later, her phone lit up with his name. After all that silence, the sight of it made her knees weaken. It was just one message. "I miss you." 1 month of silence shattered in 3 words. Sienna stared at her phone, her breath caught halfway in her chest. She read it once, twice, 3 times, half expecting it to vanish if she blinked. Her hands moved before she could think. "Where have you been? Why didn't you answer? Are you okay?" She hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for the little typing bubble to appear. It never did. That night, she kept her phone on the pillow beside her. Every tiny vibration, every ghost notification that wasn't really there, made her jolt awake. The next afternoon, another message came. "I think about you a lot." She exhaled a shaky laugh, the tightness in her chest loosening. Her irritation, the endless questions she had rehearsed in her head, melted into something softer, something dangerously close to forgiveness. It didn't matter where he'd been, not really. He was here now. He was reaching out. They began talking again, short bursts of messages, little jokes, tiny snapshots of their days. It felt almost normal. Almost. When he suggested meeting that weekend, she agreed instantly. She didn't even pretend to play hard to get. This time, she told herself, she wouldn't let him disappear. The day before the date, Sienna was cutting through a narrow side street when she noticed an old woman struggling with grocery bags. On instinct, she stepped forward. "Here, let me help you." The woman accepted with a nod of gratitude, her thin hands clutching the paper bags as they walked side by side toward the main road. Halfway there, the woman glanced at her. "Oh, you were at," she hesitated, eyes narrowing as if trying to recall something precisely. "At the building on Holloway Street a month ago, weren't you?" Sienna blinked in surprise. "Yeah. How did you know I was there? Have we met before? Or, do you live in that apartment building, too?" The woman shook her head quickly. No, I don't. I live nearby. But I know that building. Everyone around here does. Sienna tilted her head. By the way, do you know a young man named Evan? He lives there. Something flickered in the old woman's expression, a shift from curiosity to something tighter, heavier. Her lips pressed together before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. I knew a young man named Evan. She paused, as though tasting the weight of the words. Evan, he died 3 years ago. Car accident. Right outside the city, with 4 of his friends. The world tilted beneath Sienna's feet. Her hands went cold around the grocery bags. Her tongue felt thick, useless, as if the ability to speak had been stolen from her. The old woman was still talking, something about a memorial, about how sudden it had been, but Sienna didn't hear the rest. Her phone buzzed in her hand. The screen lit up with his name. One new message. I can't wait to see you. That night, Sienna went to the place they had agreed to meet. She told herself she didn't believe the old woman, not really. People get stories wrong all the time. Maybe it was some other Evan. Maybe the dates were wrong. Maybe she'd misheard. But deep down, beneath the defiance, there was a knot of doubt twisting in her chest. She wanted answers. The street was empty. Too empty. Even the usual hum of passing traffic felt far away. The air carried an unnatural chill, seeping under her coat and into her bones. Sienna stood there for almost an hour, her eyes darting to every shadow that shifted, every figure that passed on the far side of the road. She kept checking her phone. Nothing. Out of frustration, she scrolled back to the picture she'd posted a month ago, the one from the little party with Evan's friends. At first, it looked as she remembered, until it didn't. Her stomach tightened. She wasn't standing next to Evan in that photo. She wasn't standing next to anyone. It was just her, smiling into the camera, a paper cup in hand, inside what was clearly an abandoned apartment. Bare walls. Dusty floors. A sagging couch in the corner. The comments suddenly read differently. Girl, you're so brave to go there alone. I've heard stories about that place, careful. Wait, is that the old building on Holloway Street? One reply caught her eye, that place has been abandoned for years. After the accident. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She began searching online, fingers trembling against the glass of her phone. It didn't take long to find it. A news article. A mangled car, police tape fluttering in the wind. 5 names in the headline. Evan's name was one of them. The date, 3 years ago. None of them had survived. The article mentioned the memorial candles, the closed-off intersection, the stories from neighbors about strange noises in the building where Evan used to live. The same building she had been in. The party. The laughter. The introductions. Her blood ran cold as the realization settled over her like a weight she couldn't shake. She had kissed a ghost. She had played games with him. She had met his friends, and every single one of them had been dead for years. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her breath sharp in the cold night air. That's when she felt it, warm breath against her ear, too close, too real. A voice, low and tender. I've been here the whole time. Her head snapped around. No one was there. Her phone chimed in her hand, the sound unnaturally loud in the empty street. One last message. Now we can be together, forever.